need you to go back to Earth and bring Invincible here.
Hey everyone, welcome to a Decoding TV bonus episode. On this bonus episode, we're going to be covering Invincible Season 2, Part 2. I'm David Chen here with Patrick Klepek. Let's just get right into it. The final 4 episodes were released a few weeks ago. We're just getting to them now. We're going to talk about full spoilers for the rest of the season. Before we do that, I first want to acknowledge Jesse, Earl, and I covered the first part of Invincible Season 2 several months ago. It feels like a year ago, but it was several months ago. I'd recommend people check that out. Jesse has a lot of awesome knowledge from the comics, but Patrick Klepek, I'm curious, what'd you think of the part 2 of season 2? Did you think this was a worthwhile conclusion to the season?
I experienced this all kind of in one shot. I haven't had to wait long periods between Invincible season 1, season 2, part 1, part 2. It was broadly unfamiliar with the comic, but I think season 2, part 2 is satisfying, but it seems like it's shotgun. Like, again, I'm not familiar with the comic. I'd be very curious to if you can illuminate a little bit on what Jesse's interpretation of this adaptation was, because I get the sense as someone unfamiliar with the original comic that it is just shotgunning storylines at a really rapid pace, in a way that it never loses track of its main character or main characters. But there are so many side characters that when they show up again, I'm like, who the fuck are you? Like, why do I care about you?
Right.
In a way that I think essentially ends up really hurting the main villain, the main like antagonist of this second season, in a way that I think was, it's just, it's overstuffed. That's Invincible as a series is overstuffed, and yet extremely strong, extremely enjoyable. And I adore like many, many parts of it.
In terms of superhero action, I think this is one of the best shows on TV. It's one of the best places to watch superhero action because like you're actually seeing what like the superheroes all have interesting abilities. They use them in interesting ways. The abilities interact with each other in interesting ways. So it cannot be beat, in my opinion. It's one of the best, and also because of the fact that it's animated, they can come up with all kinds of crazy. They can quote unquote shoot anything. They can. Hey, you want to see what a Superman would be like fighting a kaiju that's trying to take down a cruise ship? Like, we can do it. It's no problem. It costs the same as the scene where the people are talking to each other. Like, it's, and so I love that about the show, and that alone makes it worth watching. Obviously, there's some really interesting characters and some interesting storylines, but I agree with your assessment. It really feels like they've lost control of the storytelling a little bit in season 2. And one of the key insights that Jesse shared with us on Decoding TV was often like what you see in an episode is what would be covered in like an issue of the comic, right? And so it might take you days to read an issue, right? Like, whereas like in this show, they compress it down to like 40 minutes worth of time. And that results in things feeling pretty rushed and in the show feeling a little bit aimless. Season 1 ends in this extremely intriguing place of, hey, Omni-Man's supposed to enslave the planet, and he has this massive fight with Invincible, who tries to stop him from doing so. And then you're like, oh, wow, what are the consequences of that going to be? And season 2, parts 1 and 2 only begin to answer that. And I understand, like, in the comics, it probably works the same way. But, like, as a result, that to me is the most interesting storyline. And as a result, it felt like this season moved that plot line along so little. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that was the thing I cared about the most. And it's the thing that felt like it moved the least. And also we had all these other like side quests that happened, right? That felt like the show was trying to cram in like a whole story arc into one episode. Meanwhile, the story arcs I wanted it to pay more attention to, I don't think it did. So for me, this was not a hugely successful season. It has some great stuff about it. I will say the stuff between Mark and Amber was probably some of the stronger stuff in the show for me. Mark and Amber's relationship, but yeah, overall, I thought it was pretty weak. And I have to say, splitting it up into 2 parts was really rough for this particular season because there's a character named Angstring Levy who is really important in the first half of the season, who comes back in a big way in the finale. But like, because of the way in which I watched it, it has been months since I've even thought about Angstring Levy. You know what I'm saying? Like, and so when he shows up again, I'm like, okay, like why do I care about this guy again? You know, like, and so I think splitting the show up would be challenging anyway. And I'm saying it was specifically bad for this show and the way it chose to structure its story. So those are my overall thoughts. But let's talk about what actually happened in the show. When episode 4 ended, Omni-Man was getting taken back to Viltrum to face justice for abandoning his mission. Viltrumites had decimated the planet of Thraxon, but Invincible helps them to rebuild and also takes home his half-brother Oliver to live with him and his mom on Earth. We got a few side adventures with the Guardians as they try to stop some villains, including a group of mind-controlling aliens called the Sequids. They also face off against the Lizard League, which results in Rex getting shot in the head, Ray getting eaten, and duplicates apparent death. Awesome scene. Like that whole sequence was incredible, I thought. The Lizard League and them fighting against them. And Invincible is a show that's proven it is okay killing off major characters at a moment's notice. And that's something I really admire about the show. Like the first episode obviously killed off a bunch of people, but you really get a sense of the tide turning against the Guardians. And when Duplicate tries to duplicate herself, when Ray tries to enlarge herself in that guy's throat and doesn't succeed, you know, like it's like, oh wow, like it's horrifying. It's horrifying what's happening to these characters. Yeah. Anyway, I don't know. Did you have any reaction to that, Patrick Klepek?
Well, my broad reaction is, which my broad reaction to the show is, its scope is just unbelievably large of the character it's wanting telling, going from an Earth-based story to a cosmic to a universe-spanning story.
Yeah.
And I desperately wish so many of these characters were just present in spin-offs where they could be more fully fleshed out characters. Because every time that Mark's not on screen,
well, there is one, by the way, the Adam Eve.
Adam
right?
Eve,
But, yeah,
right?
yeah.
Well, there's just one episode, though, right? It's one.
Yeah.
It's a one-off. Like Mark is the heart of the story for me, and every time he's not on screen and it's spending time, it's not that I don't enjoy these sequences with, like, the Justice League equivalent and like their adventures they're going on. Like the action is spectacular.
Yes,
but it every time we go on one of those adventures, and it doesn't have a direct consequence on like the emotional arc of Mark. It's taking away from what makes the show interesting in the first place, which is the conclusion of that first season, and the tension of like your father turns out to be a villain, like it's Superman goes bad, and like you are like, what does it mean to like be the son of something? Like that's what I meant. That's the story I'm interested in. And season 2 just but like in the universe, let's talk about the Viltrumites and like what's going on with them, and like I just don't fucking care. Like I would care if it had more time to spend with each of these individual pieces, but the show does not, even for having a longer running time than your standard animated show. Like it chooses to have a running time that is closer to like a standard live action drama. But there's just so much going on with Mark and Omni-Man like on its own that it just get like
agreed.
That family, their arc of dealing with like this man that lied to them, the way that like Mark's mother was like described as like a pest, like, or a pet rather, that like that's a whole season. Like that's plenty to work with. And so the show gets saved, I think, over and over by its spectacular action, but undercuts the storytelling for Mark, for his family, which is ultimately what I think is the most compelling part about the show.
100% agree with everything you just said. I will say I had a great experience watching this whole sequence with the Guardians facing off against the Lizard League, because I had this question in my mind. You know, it's unclear how Duplicate's powers actually work, right? Like they don't actually explain it. But I did think to myself, if I was Duplicate, I would keep a copy of myself somewhere real safe. And
I can understand theorizing that. I will say they got me on that one, like with where the season ends going. I was like, that's really, I was like, that's really clever. If you didn't pick up on that,
really, you're going to duplicate. You have the ability to duplicate yourself endlessly, and you're not going to keep a copy of yourself somewhere. That's like superhero malpractice, basically. So then it's revealed that she does have a copy, and it's a big. But that whole storyline kind of sums up one of the issues of the show is, the immortal has a connection to Kate and is really broken up when she dies, and then when they reunite at the end of the season, you're supposed to be like, oh wow, that's amazing. I
Who
didn't
is
really
the
feel that.
immortal? Who
Exactly.
is this character? I have
didn't really
no
feel that much.
idea.
Well, okay. I mean, he's shown up in the previous episodes, so there's some, but it's like, yeah, we know so little about him. We spend so little time with him. That kind of sums up some of the issues with the show, right? Is do we care about the immortal and Duplicate's relationship at this point? Not really. And why is that? Because we haven't spent enough time with him.
Yeah.
The show is just trying to do too much in too little time, I think. So anyway, Mark and Amber's relationship strains under the weight of Mark's superhero duties. Things come to a head when a Viltrumite interrupts a date, threatens to kill Amber, and tries to convince Mark to accept his mission to prepare Earth for enslavement. She's not successful at doing that, but Mark and Amber's relationship ends nevertheless. This was really effective storyline for me. The idea of like, oh hey, if you're dating a superhero, that's hard. And like, what is that actually like? It's hard because the person vanishes for months at a time. You don't know what they're doing, and and then you feel bad for complaining about it because they're literally saving the world. So then they go on this date together, and it's like, oh wow, this is why they fell in love in the first place. Maybe things are going to work out for these crazy cats. And then, of course, they're interrupted by a cosmic being who has superpowers, who can literally destroy the planet on her own if she wanted to. So, yeah. Any reaction to the Mark and Amber relationship this season, Patrick Levick?
Well, I mean, just even more broadly speaking, it's one of my favorite choices by the story because they pull the not quite a bait and switch, but like they set up like, well, there's Adam Eve, like obviously like these two are gonna get together, like and that's what I'm buying as the show like is unfolding. And I love in the first season, I love in the second season that they commit to drawing out the consequences of this relationship straining at so many different ends with two, like there's a really beautiful sequence. I think it's in part 2 where both Amber and Mark go off to essentially have a kind of a therapeutic session with somebody to talk about the relationship. And it's splitting between the conversations each of them are having with somebody else. It's like a storytelling highlight of the season. It is beautiful. It is heart-wrenching. It's exceptionally well done. It's a huge, like Amber Mark, at least for as many things that the show loses track of, which are often like the side character, like it's really the side characters don't get enough time to become full characters in the show. It never really loses sight of Amber and Mark. And I think this show functionally wouldn't work if it lost sight of Mark and his mother, Mark and Amber. But the show always like finds time, grounds itself back with these characters, with the women in his life, and how he is trying to make these relationships work or not work. And it's absolutely one of my favorite parts of the show because I think they're very honest with these two characters. Like they allow themselves to fail and they're flawed, and it's a really great part of the show.
Yeah, it explores this idea. I know, like I haven't watched the CW TV shows, but like it's an interesting concept of what is it like to date a character that is essentially supernatural, and how difficult that must be. And I like that it makes time to explore that. So,
and it's not just supernatural. I think there's a very relatable aspect. If you've ever been in a relationship where the ups and downs of like careers and things like that. Like I think there you can read right into a relationship like that. It's like, what is it like where you're moving or you have to change jobs because like your significant other is the one that makes the most money, has the dominant career. Like that was like something that was very much part of like my wife and I's relationship when I was younger. That dynamic like changed as we got older. And so I think it's obviously in a heightened context with it being, this Superman-like character, but I do think there's a deeply relatable aspect to the idea of like one part of a relationship understandably dominating the arc of that relationship.
What else happens in this season? In the finale, Angstrom Levy finally shows up again. I think we saw him in like post-credit scenes of an episode or two. Angstrom is a dimension-hopping guy who knows that in many dimensions, Invincible is actually a sadistic murderer. So he comes to take revenge on Invincible and terrorize his family. He teleports Invincible to a bunch of other dimensions, and they finally land on a desolate planet. Invincible's emotions get the better of him, and then he kills Angstrom Levy. Want to mention, like, the whole Angstrom Levy stuff, I'm not a fan of the pacing of it, but the way it was executed was really cool. Like, first of all, you see Angstrom visiting all these other dimensions and like experiencing Invincible and how like Invincible sucks in most dimensions, and that's like really scary to watch. You also see that Angstrom Levy's powers are really considerable. He can like throw a portal in front of you and then Invincible flies into it. I frankly don't know why he didn't just stop after the first one. Like just teleport Invincible to a dimension where everything is burning fire all the time, and then just be like, I'm done. Don't need to bring him back again. But the way he visits other dimensions is super cool. There's like a Spider-Man-esque character, right?
Mm-hmm.
Reading here from Variety, by the way, who broke down some of these. Mark crashes into a web-slinging superhero named Agent Spider, who's fighting a tentacled villain called Omnipotus, a clear parody of Spider-Man and Dr. Octopus. Actor Josh Keaton, who voiced Spider-Man in the Spectacular Spider-Man and other shows, even cameos as Agent Spider. He also talks to a cape-wearing bat-themed superhero off-camera and runs across some talking zombies, which is an homage to The Walking Dead, also created by Robert Kirkman. So anyway, end quote. So those are some of the other dimensions he goes to, and I thought those are all really like delightful and clever. It was also funny that in an interview, the question was asked, "Hey, did you have to ask permission from DC to put Batman in the finale?" And Robert Kirkman said, "That's not Gotham City. That's not Batman. That's a completely different Bat character that Mark is referring to. If the audience is inferring a certain thing from it, I don't have any control over that. The audience gets to take away from it what they will, but it was never our intention to imply anything remotely close to the Batman character." End quote. I thought that was very funny.
Very funny. Very. I talked to a lawyer before I did this interview.
Because they never say the word Batman. They just heavily imply it. But anyway, Mark is seemingly stranded on the planet when all of a sudden the Guardians show up from the future, from his own dimension. They've developed portal and time travel technology, and they send him back home. What'd you think?
This is so. I agree with you that the villain, who really is introduced as a season-defining villain and is there for like the opening episode,
the opening, and then the end,
and the ending. It's a real. If you want to, in a nutshell, what are the storytelling problems with this show? Like that character is it. Like he is set up as someone like, oh, this makes sense how he's going to be very present throughout the entire season. Nope, just gone. Like post credits is like all we're going to give you to kind of know what's been going on. It's a discredit to what otherwise should be a pretty interesting villain. But even the villain's power set and how like some of the storytelling is resolved at the end of the season is emblematic of this. And again, I think this probably goes back to the original comic. Like this is less of an adaptation as much as like the source material. Like, okay, I keep buying into this world, and then the world has to get weirder and weirder and grand. Like it's not just that there are like superheroes. There's also space, and now we're also adding time dimensions, and now there's like different versions of like it's just a ton. I can understand how it probably maybe works a little bit better in the comic where there's more room to breathe. But here it has the feeling of like, and I've got this toy and I've got this toy and I've got this toy. And isn't this neat? And it's like, yeah, it's neat, but I liked the toys it just feels like like it's just bursting at the seams to, I wonder sometimes, like I know this show is adapted hand in hand with Robert Kirkman, the person responsible for the source material. I often wonder like that there are good reasons to do that. There are bad reasons to do that. And I think there's a lot of great parts about this adaptation, but part of adapting is like not bringing everything along the way. And there's like a strong energy to this adaptation that's like, well, I mean, that was such a cool idea. Like we got to put it in the cartoon too, right? Like it's got to be. And it's like, man, like if this show had half of what it was featured, I don't know, it'd be twice as good.
Might be a better show.
It might be a better show. And I think that's probably difficult as like the creator to like understand what are the needs of this version of the story. And I feel like that doesn't happen enough in Invincible.
I was more bothered by this being like a literal Deus Ex Machina. It's like, yes, Mark is learning. Oh, I shouldn't have snapped and killed that guy. Right? He has that lesson, but nothing about him being saved is really connected with anything he does. You know what I'm saying? Like it's just like,
No.
oh, hey, oh, like the whole time I was thinking to myself, oh my gosh, Mark has really screwed himself now. Like I don't know how he's going to get out of this one because he has murdered Angstrom Levy while they're on a desolate dimension. Like
Poor choice.
portrait. It's like, how is he going to get back? He has no one. He's completely screwed. Literally, his friends show up in a portal and save him. Like it's like, okay, not particularly satisfying resolution to that. Patrick, I feel like I've soured you on the season because you came into this pretty positive on the season.
I think
into this
my
episode.
negativity comes from a desire for the show to be better than
Right.
it is. Like it is one of my favorite animated things. I have watched the show at a feverish like pace for the last like month, like couple of months. Like I just think it should be better than it is. Like it's a show I want more. Like when I haven't watched the Adam Eve spinoff, which is sort of an origin story for the character, but like, oh, you know what the show needs is like more of the, like, I hope that there is a desire to do more of this, where if it can't be featured necessarily in the main beats of the seasons, find ways to give these characters more room to breathe. So really it's less of a problem with what I'm watching, as much as like I just kind of wish the season was twice as long. I wish these characters had more room to breathe. Like it's more, it's really, I like, either the show needs to have less so that it can do more with that less, or have more so that there can just be more.
Have more episodes, right? Yeah,
right. That's it's easy for me to say. Like I'm sure stuff like this isn't cheap. It takes a long time to do, but I'm really, I hope I'm actually very high on the show in general. It comes with like one of my highest recommendations. I just think because it's operating at such a high level in many respects, the parts where it doesn't work just like really frustrate me, because I think it could be that much better.
Yeah, I feel very similarly. There is one other major plotline. The Unopan, Alan, who's played by Seth Rogen, was originally thought dead after the events of part 1, but it turns out he's grown back bigger and stronger after he's been injured, which is something Unopans do. And as the finale ends, we learn that Alan has purposefully infiltrated a Viltrumite prison with Omni-Man and is communicating with him there, encouraging him to fight against the other Viltrumites. And that's basically where the season ends. There's a few other side storylines this season. We talked about Duplicate almost getting killed, but then she's alive. We learned that Donald, a member of the GDA, the Global Defense Agency, has actually died many times, and the Donald that we knew is actually in a robot body. Rudy and Monster Girl's relationship develops a little bit further. They argue about Rudy's desire to get her to stop transforming. There's a couple of other like subplots I didn't even mention. But yeah, I mean, it feels like the show's trying to do a lot, and some of it is landing, and as a result, it feels very overstuffed to me. But I did have a good time watching the show. I'm still going to continue watching it in season 3. Hopefully the wait is not as long. Hopefully they don't split it up into 2 parts,
They said that they've said the wait between 2 and 3 is going to be much, much shorter. Like they've already apparently recorded the VO. Like they're in the, like it sounds like it could be as short as a year wait between seasons, if not a little much longer. And so you mentioned Seth Rogen. One thing that worried me a little bit when I looked at the cat, as I was sitting down to watch the show for the first time, like I'm looking through the cast and I'm like, oh, it's a choice to put a lot of like known voices like this. It's very difficult in animation where it's like Seth Rogen's voice is so distinctive. Like, I'm hearing Seth Rogen, and I would credit to his character, credit to several characters in this show, including like a J.K. Simmons. Like, even though this show often casts like really notable voices that could very easily dominate the characterization, I found myself buying it almost every single time.
I agree.
Like Sandra Oh is like, there's just, it's a terrific, yes, there's notable names with notable voices, but I also think the voice acting like across the board is like really, really fantastic.
I think Sterling K. Brown is Angstrom Levy, one of the strongest aspects of the show.
Man, like he is terrific in that. This show has lots of violence, and I will say one thing that I think season 2 manages to do really well is the violence can still be shocking, even though it's probably one of the most violent animated shows, certainly most violent superhero properties I've ever watched. And usually that can get numbing or it can feel like a gimmick. And I don't think Invincible ever quite gets there. It finds new ways. Like the end of season 1, like the fight between Invincible and Omni-Man, like the sequences where, like he's holding Invincible up through a train car and you're just watching bodies disintegrate.
Yeah.
The sequence at the end of season 2 where like Mark's mom's arm gets snapped is one of the most grotesque things I have watched animated in anything like ever. But the stakes are like so high there that even though it is not dozens of bodies being mutilated in this spectacularly gory subway scene, which itself is its own sort of like horrifying beauty, like that scene lands. And so that's one of the strongest points of the show is that it's ultra violent without feeling, I don't know, masturbatory about it. Like it knows how to deploy it. Like it knows what it's doing. And I
think
found,
it's occasionally masturbatory.
It can be, but I will say to its credit, it's still able to land. Like it's not just that, right? It's not just like like it'd be really cool like if this body like did this like that again. Like I just go to that scene as much as I think that the villain is misused in season 2 or underused. That final episode is fantastic. Everything in the house is incredible. Like the scene where he just throws the baby like across the room. And, I've got 2 kids, so I'm a little more sensitive to stuff like that, I suppose. But like, I'm like, holy fuck. And like nothing happens. Like nothing happens. Like the baby's fine. But this is a show, again, where you can have spectacular violence. And the thing that's got me on the edge of my seat is this guy whipping a baby.
Right.
Who I know is is actually a superhero and he probably would survive falling to the ground just fine. But like they got me. And so it's just something to note, like even at the end of a second season where I would describe the violence of this show as like wildly over the top. It does deploy it like still well in very particular moments that I find interesting.
I actually felt a little bit for Donald, this season where there was a really cool moment in the last batch of episodes where like Donald blows himself up and he's trying to figure out like what happened to him. And apparently it's a thing where like lots of people get robot bodies to replace them in this universe. But the Donald thing was an example of taking a side character who like literally, I don't think we've even seen his face, like his whole face, because he's had glasses. Like it would be a character where they don't even bother like making eyes for that character because they're never going to use them in the show. And then turning him into a character who's like, hey, there's actually some pathos attached to this character, which I really appreciated.
Well, they gave it time, right? Like if anything, what was, and again, this goes to like a show that I am kind of slagging on, but like it's because I want like better for it. I want more from it. I think that little like subplot and how it pays off and how human and like grounding it feels in a increasingly cosmic and like grandiose show. Like what if we had gotten that something equivalent for the Immortal, so that when we get to the reunion at the end of the season, how much more powerful would that be to know a little bit more about what this character is like? He's called the Immortal. That seems like a fucking burden, man. But I get no insights that he lost all of his friends and family when like the heroes were murdered at the beginning of season 1. God, not going to really spend that much time with that. And so it's when the show, it's like, it's not like the material isn't there. It's just, it can only pick so many fights. And when it does, the ones it does pick, I think are like land really well, which maybe the solution to this is for me to just start picking up the comics and like filling in some of that backstory there to see where it goes, because it's not like the show doesn't have ideas for what is going to make these characters interesting. There's just not enough running time to actually tell that story.
Yeah. So I think they kind of went a little bit out of control of the storytelling this season. I hope that they are able to be a little bit more focused. Based on the interviews I've read with Robert Kirkman, it seems like they are going to focus more on the Omni-Man storyline next season. I think that's a big part of it. The Adam Eve Mark relationship is going to get more attention, it seems. So that's all positive, but yeah, the show tries to do a lot, perhaps too much. That said, very curious what people think. Let us know what your thoughts are at decodingtv@gmail.com. Thank you so much for listening to this bonus episode. And we really appreciate all the paid subscribers at decodingtv.com for making this podcast possible. We hope you enjoy the bonus episodes we're putting out. And until next time, he is Patrick Klepek. I'm David Chen. We'll see you later. Hey everyone, David Chen here. Thank you so much for watching that video from Decoding TV. If you want to get an audio version of the show, all you got to do is go to podcast.decodingtv.com. And if you want to support what we do, get ad-free episodes of the podcast and also bonus episodes of the podcast, go to decodingtv.com and become a paid member. Of course, you can also like and subscribe for more. We appreciate it. Thanks. See you later.